So on this problem, they asked us to graph y equals secant of x, and then they have two specific questions that they want us to address. First, here's the graph of the secant of x. It has infinitely many of these alternating U-shaped things. I've put in red the interval from 0 to 2 pi, which is one period of this function. So there's two ways you can get this graph. One is just from pure memory, but I have an alternative method that I like because I don't like memorizing things. And so what I do is I just remember that the secant is undefined at infinitely many places. And that's what causes these vertical asymptotes. And where is the secant undefined? Well, to answer that, I always think to myself, the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine. And 0 doesn't have a reciprocal, and therefore anywhere that the cosine is 0, the secant won't exist. The cosine is 0 and the secant doesn't exist, therefore at places like pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 and other values, of course, as well. And that's how I remember where the graph is undefined. And then when it comes to where the sort of U-shaped things are, I just remember that the secant of 0 is the reciprocal of the cosine of 0, and the reciprocal of 1 is 1, and therefore this function would have to pass through 0, 1, and that tells me that I have an up U-shaped thing on the y-axis, and then I just alternate them from there. Again, if that logic appeals to you, great. If it doesn't, then just memorize the graph. That's the end of that. But now I'm ready to answer the questions. Question A. They want to know for the x values between 0 and 2 pi, corresponding to the red points on the graph, where the secant is less than or equal to 0. Well, the secant is the y-coordinate of this graph, by definition. And so we want to know which of the red points have y-coordinates less than 0. You can see by looking at the graph, there's that U-shaped thing underneath the x-axis that goes from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. That's the answer to question A, because for any value in that interval, the y-coordinate will be negative, and hence the secant will be negative, and hence less than 0, as prescribed by the question. Let's now move on to question B. Question B wants to know if the function is increasing on the interval from pi over 2 to pi. Well, that's true, it is. Why is that true? Because pi is the midpoint between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And you can see now that this is an increasing function from pi over 2 through pi. And that completes this problem.